Draco Malfoy leaned against the wall of the dark corridor in Malfoy Manor, breath unsteady, wand pressed tight against the inside of his robes. He was only 17, but the silver insignia emblazoned on his family's crest felt heavier than all the centuries of Malfoy blood that had come before him. His father, Lucius Malfoy, stood at the far end of the hall, half hidden in the flickering light of a guttering torch. The tension in Draco's chest wouldn't loosen. The Dark Lord was waiting in the dining room, behind grand double doors, examining various Death Eaters and demanding absolute loyalty. The hush of hushes fell upon the house whenever Voldemort arrived, saturating the corridors with dread. That night, Draco had witnessed something that splintered his illusions. A mere flick of Voldemort's wand had silenced a minor Death Eater forever, simply because he hesitated at an order. Draco's mother had turned away in horror. His father's mask had cracked for a split second, revealing the weight of his own regret. Draco realized something vital in that moment. He couldn't be this man. He couldn't be the next Lucius Malfoy, bound to cower in the presence of a snake-like tyrant. So, without another word, Draco made up his mind. He had to do the unthinkable. Ally himself with the one group he had once reviled above all else, the Order of the Phoenix. It was in a hidden alcove of the Hogwarts Astronomy Tower that Draco first met with a member of the Order. The war had escalated in the wizarding world, but Hogwarts, for all its wards and enchantments, still harbored quiet corners for secret conversations. Remus Lupin greeted Draco under a faint moonlight, shrouded in a tatty cloak that fell around his shoulders, making his lined face appear more shadowed than usual. Draco arrived late, cloak drawn over his blonde hair. He'd kept shifting glances over his shoulder the entire time, heart hammering. If his father ever found out that Draco was in contact with an Order member, there would be no turning back. Lupin spoke softly. "Draco, you asked me here, and against my own doubts I came. Tell me why." Draco swallowed. His lips felt dry, but he knew the words. "I can't do this alone." He wouldn't let them catch in his throat. "I want to help," he began, voice quavering. "I know I'm the last person you'd expect to make such an offer, but Voldemort, he's worse than you realize. He's losing patience with everyone, and if he can't break us, he'll just kill us." There was a flicker of curiosity in Lupin's eyes. "And you think you can provide something we need?" Draco nodded, a tremor running through him. "Information. Access. I know things that, quite possibly, only a handful of Death Eaters know. I know about the wards, where the Dark Lord conducts his private rituals, how he organizes his inner circle. Look," Draco's voice became urgent. "I'm not naive. I know you have no reason to trust me, but I'm done being his tool." Lupin's brow furrowed. He studied Draco for a moment, then softly replied, "We need more than words, Draco." Draco held out a small pouch. "This is a Floo password. It leads to an unused fireplace in the dungeons of Malfoy Manor, the West Wing. The Dark Lord often sets wards on the main fireplaces, but not the smaller side ones. It's how I slipped out tonight." He hesitated, then pressed the pouch into Lupin's hands. "Use it. See for yourself. I won't set you up. I've seen enough death in my home." Lupin let out a cautious breath, tucking the pouch into his cloak. "I'll relay this to the Order," he said. "If this works, we'll talk again." Thunder rumbled in the distance, and a swirl of clouds cut off the silver moon. Draco watched Lupin vanish down the narrow staircase. The weight of what he'd done made him want to collapse against the wall. He was betraying his father. He was betraying the Dark Lord. He was betraying the Malfoy name. And yet, for the first time in his life, he felt a sliver of pride in going his own way. The next evening, Narcissa Malfoy found Draco pacing in the manor's library. She didn't ask him about his restlessness. She knew better than to question him openly about matters that might endanger them both. But her eyes pleaded for an explanation. Draco couldn't bear to lie to her outright. He gave her a half-truth. "I can't stand it anymore, Mother. The murders, the fear. It's all too much." She cupped his cheek gently. "I know. Your father..." She hesitated. He says we must remain loyal, but I see in your eyes that you want out, and part of me doesn't blame you." Draco closed his eyes, letting her warmth settle in him. The Malfoys, once united, were now cracking under the sheer weight of Voldemort's tyranny. Over the next few days, Draco found ways to slip Lupin bits of intelligence. Sometimes it was a coded scrap of parchment he tucked inside a nook along the Hogwarts grounds. Other times, an enchanted snake figurine he would place in a hidden alcove by Hogsmeade Station, containing a short recorded message. And each time, the Order acted cautiously, verifying every detail before they dared plan a move. Eventually, word came to Draco in a short note signed with the initials MM. "We're ready to speak. Tomorrow at midnight, the Room of Requirement." Draco recognized the initials as Minerva McGonagall's. Draco stepped into the Room of Requirement at precisely midnight. The space had rearranged itself into a comfortable study, lined with countless shelves of dusty tomes and plush chairs. McGonagall, Lupin, and Kingsley Shacklebolt stood together, their faces stern. "Mr. Malfoy," McGonagall began, her voice unyielding, "we have tested the flu password you provided. We've sent a few of our allies to scout the West Wing. So far, we haven't encountered any traps. Can you confirm it's safe for a larger group?" "It is," Draco replied. "The West Wing used to be a servant's passage. My father hates to tread there. It reminds him of the Manor's older days, when the Malfoys employed house elves by the dozens. Voldemort never saw a need to place any significant wards. At most, you'll find dusty suits of armor." Kingsley narrowed his gaze. "I hope you understand, Malfoy, what we risk. If this is a trap, we're done for." Draco's jaw tightened. He held the man's gaze. "I know, but it isn't." He hesitated, then spoke quietly. "I'd understand if you used Veritaserum on me. If that's what it takes to ensure I'm not lying, do it." The three Order members exchanged glances. McGonagall tapped a quill on the desk, then said, "We'd prefer not to unless necessary, but you can expect we'll be watching for any sign of deception. This is not a matter we take lightly." Lupin offered a small nod of encouragement to Draco. "You're very different from the boy we once knew in our defense against the dark arts classes," he said softly. Draco responded with a grim smile. "War changes people." As the weeks passed, Draco continued to provide more precise information. The shift patterns of Voldemort's most loyal Death Eaters, times when the Dark Lord's guard was lowest, and potential weaknesses in the Manor's wards. The Order, in turn, fed Draco instructions. Small sabotage attempts he could make, ways to sow confusion or hide certain supplies. It was nerve-wracking. Draco found that lying was not the hardest part. Being believed was. On the surface, he still had to maintain the facade of arrogance and unwavering loyalty to Voldemort. If anyone so much as suspected him of defection, his life, and likely his mother's, would be snuffed out in an instant. Every visit the Dark Lord paid to the Manor saw Draco's nerves tighten. He'd catch the Dark Lord's red-rimmed eyes surveying him, as though testing his resolve. Once, while Draco was walking through a shadowy hallway, the voice of Voldemort slid through the darkness. "Come here, Draco." He froze mid-step. He had to will his feet to obey, each movement a silent terror. When he finally stood before Voldemort, the pale lips curled back in a near smile. "You're as pale as a ghost, my boy," Voldemort said, voice a lethal whisper. "You've done well for me in the past." He extended a skeletal hand and placed it upon Draco's shoulder. Draco tried not to tremble. "I expect you'll continue to do so. Keep your father in line. He's grown restless. Perhaps you can help him see sense." Draco bowed his head, managing a forced murmur. "Yes, my lord." In that moment, the thought seared through Draco's mind. "I cannot fail. If I fail, we lose everything." Half a year into Draco's secret double life, the war outside intensified. The Ministry of Magic was falling into deeper chaos, and the Muggle world began to catch flickers of strange events that defied explanation. Death Eaters were moving openly. Giants, Dementors, and other dark creatures roamed the night. The Order needed a greater advantage, and Draco volunteered to push his infiltration to the next level. At a covert meeting in Grimmauld Place, where Draco was temporarily smuggled in under heavy disguise, he met not only with McGonagall, Lupin, and Kingsley, but also with an old schoolmate, Harry Potter. The two locked eyes, memories flooding back. The Great Hall at Hogwarts, potions classes with Professor Slughorn, Quidditch rivalry, scuffles, pointed insults, and deep resentment. Draco could almost sense the swirl of complicated feelings in the small drawing room, heavy with tension. Harry was the first to break the silence. "This is unexpected." Draco fought back the urge to sneer. He forced himself to push aside years of schoolboy grudges. "Believe me, it's not exactly my first choice, but we both want the same thing now, the end of Voldemort." Harry glanced at Lupin, who gave a small nod. Then Harry turned back to Draco. "Right, so how do we do it?" Draco exhaled, letting relief wash over him. He pulled out a folded piece of parchment from inside his robes. "We suspect the Dark Lord is trying to create additional Horcruxes. There's talk of him dabbling in new rituals. I overheard him mention a place near Godric's Hollow." Harry's eyes flashed. "That's my parents' resting place. He might be going back there." Draco nodded. "I can't guarantee it, but it's worth investigating. If he's truly planning something there, it might be a chance to catch him off guard. If you can sabotage that ritual, or at least glean what he's up to, you'd stand a better chance at stopping him for good." Hermione Granger stepped out from behind Harry, startling Draco a bit. He hadn't realized she'd been listening from the doorway. Her wand was in her hand, her expression firm. "This plan, it depends on you sneaking out more information, doesn't it?" "Yes," Draco replied. "I can try to be more direct. I can attempt legitimacy on some of the lesser Death Eaters or rummage through my father's study. But if I get caught, I'm done. My parents are done." She studied Draco carefully, eyes more calculating than Draco remembered from Hogwarts. "If you're truly serious, we'll do everything to protect you. But understand this, the moment we suspect treachery, you're on your own." Draco gave a curt nod. "Fair enough." In the following days, Draco wrestled with the toll of constant deception. Sleep eluded him. Even in his own bedroom, he felt an unshakable sense that eyes were upon him, that wards and enchantments might be exposing him. Meanwhile, his father's mood darkened. Lucius sensed that something about his son was off, though he couldn't pinpoint the cause. He began questioning Draco's every movement. "You're up early?" Lucius remarked one morning, voice cold, as Draco tried to slip out of the dining room. "Where are you heading?" Draco forced a casual shrug. "The library," he lied. "I need to brush up on some spells in case the Dark Lord has another task for me." Lucius studied him from beneath half-lidded eyes. "Very well, but be mindful. The slightest hint of disloyalty these days. You've seen what he does to traitors." Draco swallowed and left, reeling from the unspoken threat in his father's words. For a brief, bitter moment, he wondered if Lucius regretted pledging the Malfoy name to Voldemort so long ago. At last, the message arrived, just as Draco predicted. The Dark Lord would depart to an old graveyard near Godric's Hollow. The rumor among the Death Eaters was that he sought to create a new artifact, forging a deeper tie to his own twisted past. Draco watched quietly, gleaning every detail, storing them in his memory. He immediately let the Order know through carefully placed signals, dropping enchanted beetle shells in the forest near Hogsmeade, timed to coincide with the full moon. The night of Voldemort's departure approached. Draco held his breath. The Order had a plan. If they could distract the Death Eaters at Malfoy Manor, a small contingent, led by Harry, would ambush Voldemort at Godric's Hollow. The battle would be short but decisive, or so they hoped. On the designated evening, the Order launched a diversionary strike on Malfoy Manor. Through the unguarded fireplace in the West Wing, Lupin, Tonks, and several others burst onto the scene, their spells scattering the lesser Death Eaters. The manor's corridors erupted in blasts of wand fire and smoky curses. Draco, who had advanced knowledge, quickly positioned himself in a place of minimal suspicion. Feigning a heroic defense of the manor while intentionally missing his spells, or subtly stunning Death Eaters who were about to target his new allies. Lucius Malfoy confronted Draco in the entrance hall, eyes fierce with suspicion. "What are you doing?" "Aim at them, Draco." Draco nodded, brandishing his wand. He pretended to hurl a curse at Tonks, but angled it so it narrowly missed her by mere inches. In the chaos, she shot him a fleeting, knowing glance before diving behind a pillar. Lightning-like flashes of spells ricocheted across the walls. Draco's heart thundered in his chest. If Lucius recognized the subterfuge, everything would unravel. There was a colossal boom upstairs. Part of the chandelier in the dining room crashed to the floor, scattering shards of crystal. The air filled with dust and the acrid stench of scorched wood. All the while, Draco tracked the clock in his mind. Harry and the others should have reached Godric's Hollow by now. They'd be counting on the plan playing out. Just a few more minutes. Hang in there. At last, a figure in black swirling robes apparat into the foyer, Bellatrix Lestrange. Her wild grin turned to fury as she took in the battle. She flung curses at Lupin and Tonks without a second thought, cackling as she did. Draco felt a pang of dread. Bellatrix was lethal. The plan risked going sideways if she decided to abandon the manor to reinforce Voldemort. Thinking fast, Draco conjured a silver shield charm that erupted from the tip of his wand, deflecting Bellatrix's curses. She whirled, confusion and suspicion dancing in her mad eyes. "Draco," she hissed, "protect me while I call the Dark Lord." Draco had no choice but to nod, stepping in close. If she actually contacted Voldemort, that would ruin the ambush. Draco had to stop her. But how? Bellatrix drew out a dagger in her other hand and mumbled an incantation Draco didn't recognize. The air swirled with black smoke, as though forming a spectral serpent that coiled around her wrist. A means to summon Voldemort from afar. "No!" Draco shouted, albeit in alarm rather than devotion. He aimed his wand at the conjuring energy and fired a silent expulso curse. A brilliant flash shredded the spectral serpent. Bellatrix shrieked in outrage, tumbling backward. Draco lunged, summoning the dagger from her hand before she could do more. It clattered onto the marble floor. "Foolish boy," she spat, rallying. She pointed her wand at Draco, raw hatred in her eyes. The hex came too quickly for him to duck. Green light seared across his vision, but some shield charm, caught it at the last second. Draco hit the floor, ears ringing. Sparks still danced in front of his eyes. A large shape moved overhead. Kingsley Shacklebolt, his wand aimed steadily at Bellatrix. Stupefy, Bellatrix managed to twist aside, but she clipped her shoulder on the curse. Dazed, she spun in place, then apparat away with a crack, leaving behind a swirl of black smoke. Kingsley glanced down at Draco, offering a hand. "Come on, Malfoy. We need to get out of here. Without reinforcement from Bellatrix, the rest should scatter." Draco grabbed Kingsley's hand, pulling himself upright. He could feel blood trickling down his temple from where he'd slammed into a step. Overhead, the Death Eaters were retreating under the relentless spells of the Order. Narcissa Malfoy, trembling and uncertain, stepped into the corridor. She locked eyes with Draco, as though unsure of whether to beg for mercy or rush to his side. Then, wordlessly, she sank to her knees, relief overshadowing everything else. Draco knelt beside her. "Mother, come with me." She nodded wordlessly, tears brimming in her eyes. With the manor in near ruins, Draco and Narcissa followed the departing Order members through the fireplace. As the green flames engulfed them, Draco felt an odd sense of liberation. The manor, the legacy, the burdens, they were all burning behind him. Word spread swiftly through the Order's network. Harry and a small team had engaged Voldemort in the cemetery near Godric's Hollow. The outcome remained uncertain. Draco insisted on joining the reinforcements, though the others hesitated. "You're injured," Lupin argued, but Draco persisted. "I have to see this through. I want that monster gone." Reluctantly, they let him come. The night sky over Godric's Hollow was alive with frantic bursts of light from curses and counter-curses. Tombstones lay shattered, dirt and stones strewn across the grass. Draco arrived to see Harry locked in a fierce duel with Voldemort, their wands intersecting in a blazing arc of gold. Hermione and Ron Weasley darted around the periphery, trying to contain rogue Death Eaters who'd managed to apparate in. The shriek of curses whizzed overhead, sizzling the air. Draco skirted a toppled headstone, searching for a vantage point. He spotted Nagini, Voldemort's giant snake, slithering through the tall grass, aiming for an unsuspecting Hermione's ankles. Draco raised his wand, fear twisting his gut. No second-guessing. "Reducto!" he shouted. The curse blasted into the ground just behind Nagini, causing the serpent to hiss and recoil. Hermione spun, wand at the ready. She saw Draco, recognized his intention, then seized the opportunity to cast a powerful severing charm. Nagini let out a final hiss before collapsing, body thrashing in the grass. That momentary distraction caught Voldemort's attention. His red eyes darted toward Draco, and Harry's advantage wavered. Voldemort's lips curled in a sneer of pure contempt. "Malfoy traitor!" Draco froze. Instinct screamed at him to run, but instead he moved closer to Harry, wand shaking. "You're not going to win," Draco managed, surprising even himself with the venom in his voice. "You're finished." Voldemort's laugh was a sound of nails scraping glass. "You dare speak to me that way? You worthless whelp. Avada!" Harry's wand moved in a blur, a swirl of bright magic intercepting Voldemort's killing curse. The tension in the air snapped like a whip. Sparks rained down around them. The tombstones vibrated with the force of the magical collision. In that split second, Draco seized his courage. He aimed a silent hex at Voldemort's back, hoping that, even if it didn't harm him, it might break his concentration. The swirling cloak parted, and Draco's hex went wide, glancing off a protective aura around Voldemort. Still, it made Voldemort stumble for the briefest moment, a moment Harry used. With a burst of willpower, Harry pushed forward a swirling vortex of golden light. It struck Voldemort full on, sending him crashing into a crumbling angel statue. Stone wings shattered upon impact. A hush fell over the graveyard, like the lull before a great storm. Voldemort tried to stand, tried to point his wand at Harry again, but the wand shook in his hand. Something vital in his magic had begun to unravel, the unraveling that came from the destruction of Nagini, from the diminishing Horcruxes, from the turning tides of war. Harry's voice, wavering yet resolute, cut through the night. "It's over, Tom. This ends now." Voldemort lunged for one final curse, but Harry's countercharm collided with it, enveloping both spells in a roiling cloud. When the fog lifted, Voldemort stood no more. His wand fell onto the grass with a dull thump, and the half-snake visage of the most feared dark wizard in centuries simply dissolved into a fine black mist, drifting away in the moonlight. Exhausted silence replaced the bedlam. Harry lowered his wand, tears glistening in his eyes. Ron and Hermione rushed to his side, relief flooding their faces. Draco staggered forward, stepping over fallen branches and the rubble of the graveyard. The others, Order members and surviving Death Eaters alike, were in shock. It was as though the entire wizarding world let out a collective breath in that moment. Kingsley Shacklebolt, nursing a cut above his eye, placed a hand on Draco's shoulder. "You played a part in this. Don't forget that." Draco simply stared at the spot where Voldemort had vanished, trying to register that it was real. The terror that had governed his life since he was a child was gone. No more cowering under threats in his own home, no more humiliating tasks to prove his family's loyalty. Draco suddenly felt drained of all energy, as though his body wanted to collapse right then and there. Harry noticed Draco, and for a moment, their gazes met. The old enmity, the bitterness of Hogwarts rivalries, still flickered somewhere in the depths of their eyes. But so much had changed. Slowly, Harry extended a hand. Draco hesitated, then clasped it. Neither said anything. That gesture, under the moonlit sky in Godric's Hollow, was enough. a quiet acknowledgement of all that had transpired. They had come a long way from two boys sneering across the Hogwarts courtyard. Ron and Hermione approached, wands still out. Ron's eyes flicked from Draco to Harry in disbelief, but Hermione, ever the keen observer, exhaled. "He helped us, Ron," she said gently. "He played his part. We don't have to like it, but we can't deny it." Ron nodded, swallowing. "Right, well, thanks, Malfoy." Draco offered a half-smile. "You're welcome, Weasley." The battered group began dispersing, tending to the wounded, searching for those who might still be lurking. The war was over, but the cleanup had just begun. The wizarding world would need to rebuild, to find a new normal after Voldemort's reign of terror. A few weeks later, Draco stood at the gates of Hogwarts, which were still under repair from the final battles of the war. He'd been invited, conditionally, to speak with McGonagall about how to move forward. The once icy headmistress greeted him with a formality that had softened slightly. "You have a long road ahead, Mr. Malfoy," she said, "but we owe you a debt of gratitude. You helped bring about the downfall of the Dark Lord. That is not a trivial thing." Draco nodded. "I just want a chance, Professor. A chance to make something of myself that isn't weighed down by my father's mistakes. I can't erase what I've done in the past, but I can try to be better." She studied him from behind her square spectacles. "You may find that some people will never trust you. You'll face suspicion. But if you persevere, you might just find your place in a better world. After all, you risked a lot to see Voldemort's defeat. That says something." Draco allowed himself a moment of hope. "Thank you," he said simply. He turned and walked into the castle, the morning sun streaming through the broken archways. Each step felt like a step into an uncharted future. Behind him, the gates clanged softly, a reminder of everything that had changed. In the courtyard, he caught a glimpse of Harry and Ginny speaking with a group of younger students. They paused to see Draco, gave him a small nod of acknowledgement, and then resumed their conversation. The hostility was gone. Acceptance? Perhaps that would take more time. But for the first time in Draco's life, he felt there might be space to grow beyond the confines of his Malfoy upbringing. The wind carried the distant laughter of students, the hum of a place once again filled with youthful hopes and grand dreams. Under the swirling banners of Hogwarts, Draco could almost sense the ghosts of the war receding. He had been an unlikely ally in the fight against the darkest wizard of the age, and now, with the dawn rising, he found a measure of redemption waiting for him. Some nights, he'd still wake in a cold sweat, haunted by what he'd done in those corridors, the secret messages, the near-deaths, the heart-stopping terror that came from defying Voldemort under his own roof. Yet he clung to the knowledge that he'd made a choice, no matter how unlikely or dangerous, to stand up for something better. And that, he realized, was what truly set him free.